probably 4 or 5 years. As Kevin mentioned, Brandon owns 2 iconic South Congress businesses. So Brandon gets it. He's a hustler. He's an entrepreneur. He understands what it's like, just like us, to own a small business and to take it and to do something great. And Brandon's home is going to be a real treat today. So Silva, I will turn it over to you and let you jump in and get started.
All right, we're here.
Here we are. Welcome to the home of Mysterious Planchette. Mysterious Planchette is kind of the catch-all phrase I use not only for my social media and everything, but just sort of the general catch-all of my collection. And it's actually taken from, if I have one handy, a rather common British item, the Mysterious Planchette. So this is kind of a common artifact, kind of helped me get started in my collection. And we'll start there with it, since a lot of you are probably wondering, what is a planchette? A planchette is an automatic writing device. So that is a small device that is used like you would be familiar with a Ouija board. Actually, the indicator on a talking board or a Ouija board is also a planchette, and they descend from these devices. They evolve from these devices. Automatic writing planchettes predate the Ouija board by about 40 years, and they had a massive craze that we'll talk about, which is kind of the reason I have something to collect. And this one isn't a great specimen for kind of showing off what they do, but one like this one is. So this is an early automatic writing planchette from the post-Civil War craze in 1868, and this will kind of get us started. This comes out of Boston. It's a J.W. Cottrell Boston planchette, and as you can see, it's similar to a Ouija board planchette. It's larger. It has 2 casters or wheels. These are often ball bearings or little ivory or bone wheels, and then its third wheel, as it were, is a pencil. And so it would be placed on a large piece of butcher paper on your kitchen table, and everyone would place their hands on the item. And after a few minutes, just like the Ouija board pointer, it would start to move mysteriously, and it would write out, script out messages from beyond rather than pointing out to letters on a board. But we have lots of those too. So to kind of give you an idea of my house, the house itself is a 1946 bungalow here in Hyde Park. And it's pretty average, normal structure for a home of that type. You're probably familiar if you've ever done any drive-throughs to the neighborhood. I have pecan trees just like everyone else. Always wanted to have pecan trees because my grandfather had pecan trees. Turns out those trees are among the larger pieces of ass to deal with in the world. So yeah. I don't know that I recommend them. The stuff's falling all year round, so I'm gonna have to deal with some as soon as we're done here. So, the storm's coming through. As you enter my home, you can see that what I call my foyer, my 3.5 foot deep foyer, my fancy word for front entrance. And this is where I keep sort of an easy introduction to occultism, and that's something a lot of folks are familiar with, and that's astrology and horoscopes. So these are essentially horoscope and zodiac delineators, so that they are used as calculators for charting out astrology charts and results and planetary positions, as well as some press photographs, some sheet music, as well as we can deal with the glare, as well as some talking boards. You'll notice talking boards, Ouija boards will pervade a lot of the different displays here in my home thematically. I break them up thematically rather than by groupings, and so you get things like the mystic board here, where you have different zodiac signs that are incorporated into the design of the board.
Well, I'm sure everyone's going to want to know, what's your sign?
I'm a Taurus. I am a textbook Taurus. I'm stubborn. Yeah, I'm mostly stubborn.
Can you tell us more about this gold medallion piece on the wall?
So this is actually, like a lot of the other devices you're seeing here. Hi, that's us. This was a table. It's actually a tabletop. And this is a horoscope calculator. So if you pan over here real quick to give people an idea of something they might be more familiar with, this chart is how you craft out a horoscope. So this plots the different planetary positions, and then you're able to see the spheres of influence within each constellation, within each of the 12 signs. This table does the same thing, only with, so there's a little drawer right here, and inside that drawer are these little tabs of planetary symbols, and you would use a book to plot where in the skies a planet was at a particular time and date, usually your birth date, and then you would plug those into the different constellations to chart it out, much the same way as this paper chart, and then the astrologer could then step back and get sort of a bird's eye view of the planetary conjunctions and interplay, and then give you your reading from that. So it's it's the 1940s. I've never seen another like it in 1940s.
Beautiful.
Tabletop astrological calculator. And a lot of my collection does swerve into other aspects of the occult. I am an occult historian, but I really specialize in spiritualism, the history of the seance, and just for Blair's purposes, I'm going to open this door here. This cabinet is kind of a fun throwback. For many years, for those of you who have seen some of my work previously online, my house only became what you see today as we got ready for last year's Weird Homes Tour. And my collection used to be housed in a private room outside of my home, and it's since made its way and invaded every aspect. But this cabinet has always been here. So it had aspects of my collection. And for many years, people would hear about this collection. They would see things online. They would, ask to see it. I would invite them over. They would come in and say, they'd see at what it was at the time a relatively normal home with this one cabinet. And then my kids' room at the time, when they were quite young, was decorated like this. But my collection was really housed outside the house in the building. And so they would come in hearing about this collection, but all that was here was this one case. And I would go, oh yes, well, here's the Mysterious Planchette Archive, and take them through it. And then, of course, then wind them to another room, sort of set them up for disappointment, if you will, before finally introducing them to the actual collection room and watch their eyes pop out of their skull. And but everything has since moved to the comfort of my home now. And so this is sort of my introductory cabinet. It has a lot of things. It has tarot. It has a pretty heavy concentration of automatic writing planchettes, some smaller talking boards like the 1921 Spooky board, which actually has removable numbers and letters that you can pop out and rearrange to prevent fraudulent communications, because what you really want to do when you're talking to the spirits is add more confusion to the mix. And so some different artifacts here and there. So yeah, kind of an introductory cabinet. And speaking of introductions, what is spiritualism? I think we all have a pretty firm account of, occultism in general, but spiritualism as a movement, what is it and why do I have these things to collect? And that's an important part of what I do. And I like to get that introduction started with an actual piece of history. Of course, surrounded by lots of pieces of history, but this particular one is literally a piece of the home. How's the glare there?
I think it's okay.
Is literally a piece of the home where spiritualism was founded.
Seeing my body in the reflection. See, tilt it. Yeah, maybe. I'll just block the light.
So on March 31st, 1848, spiritualism got its start in this home. It was owned by the Fox family at the time, and they began to experience the strange poltergeist-like activities, these strange knockings and rumblings and taps and noises on the ceilings, floors, doors, and walls. And the young sisters that lived there, Katie and Maggie, Katie and Margaret, they essentially, after a few weeks of this, essentially a haunting type experience, they challenged the spirits to, do as they do. And Kate then is said to have sprung up on the bed and snapped her fingers a few times, and the spirits responded in kind. And that's really recognized as the moment where the veil between worlds was breached, and spiritualism, so this story of this haunting, not only strange noises and oh my God, we have a ghost, but there's a ghost and we can communicate with it, first ask it, rap once for yes, twice for no. You could call out the alphabet and have it, A, B, C, D, D. All right, write down D. And you could, literally form sentences and phrases and words and sentences with this. And that local phenomenon exploded in the news, essentially. It went viral, if you will. And so, yeah, it didn't remain a local story. It became national news. The sisters do demonstrations. They go on tours. They're joined by their much older sister, Leah Fox. And yeah, it just becomes an international sensation. I mean, mediums begin discovering their abilities overnight, literally, as news spread. And before you know it, you have thousands of mediums that are practicing in the continental United States and beyond as it moves.
So the people want to know, is your house haunted?
The most haunted home in Austin, Texas, right? Potentially most haunted home in Austin, Texas. I'm sad to report that despite having all the tools to open gateways to hell and beyond, it's relatively calm and peaceful around here, with the exception of a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. So.
Yeah, we have a question.
No, but we have another question. People wanted to know, Brandon seems a very well-heeled presenter and seems to be a very interesting man about town. What does he do for a living? Is he a professional teacher?
Professional teacher. Gotta get real meta here. I do lecture nationally and internationally on this subject. So I do consider myself an academic. I do have a degree in history, and I write on this subject. I have a regular column in the British publication for it's a mouthful, the Society for Psychical Research, which is the world's oldest spiritualist investigatory body, founded in the 1880s. And I have a regular column in their magazine. I am working on a rather sizable coffee table book that's been a labor of love for about 20 years now. And so that is a thing that's happening. And yeah, I have literally traveled all over the world. I'm supposed to, last week, I should have been returning from a European lecture tour where I would have, lectured in Brussels, Utrecht, Amsterdam, London, a few stops over there. And I lecture here locally at UT and Texas State, Ohio University in Athens, and yeah, a lot of places happening.
Excellent. So even though your house is not haunted, have you ever communed with the spirits through?
I have. So
Excellent.
I have, and I find them very formative and important experiences to have had. In particular, I did a lecture in Gettysburg at a paranormal conference, and I was expected, because I was one of the guest lecturers there, I was expected to be a host at one of the overnight tours. And so I'm not a ghost hunter. I don't spend any time like going around. I love old houses, don't get me wrong, and I will definitely accept any invitations to explore those, but I'm not one of the guys that walks around with the meters and everything. And but I was lecturing at this paranormal conference, and I was expected to be this overnight host, and so I don't know that side of the world, in that regard. And so everybody was setting up all their equipment. I'm like, well, I brought a Ouija board. And so we did use it. There were about 10 of us that took turns using it for about 4 hours. And I mean, once it got started, it really, really got started. And that, the planchette was just zipping around and spelling out communications. And I mean, they were cohesive. And we heard the story of this entity claimed to be a nurse that was, the house we were in was a famously haunted Gettysburg house. It was a boarding house used as a triage after the battle. So a lot of soldiers literally died on the floor right where we were sitting. And so, we got this claim, and as a woman, her birthday, her husband, her life story, other spirits that were in the room. And I'm a skeptic. I consider myself what I call a soft skeptic. That is, I'm not a believer, but I'm willing to be convinced otherwise. And so that night was very formative for me. Not that it made me a believer, but one, it showed me not only how powerful if one was already prone to belief, just how powerful your belief could be bolstered by that experience, because it is very convincing. Now, for the skeptics in the audience, this is what we call ideomotor response, whereas our muscles are contributing imperceptible actions to move the planchette in a way that our conscious brains don't detect. And our brains are subtly moving, causing our muscles to move the planchette around the board and essentially fill in the blanks of communication, but with other people that are also touching the planchette. And so that, to me, is really no less miraculous that we can spell out anything beyond gibberish. If you've got 4 people with their fingers touching this board and you're able to spell out a touching story of this woman's life and death and afterlife and all of that over the course of 4 hours. And so that experience for me, it didn't make me a believer, but it really gave me a window into the study of belief, which is really where, you know, my research comes in. And so it was important. And yeah, we'll get to some more talking boards here in a second. I've got a few.
How many? Do you know how many?
Planchettes, and we'll kind of, let's see, we can just kind of start panning this wall here.
Excellent.
This is my wall of automatic writing planchettes. I think I have cracked 200 planchettes now, as far as automatic writing planchettes. And most of what you're seeing here, that's an instruction sheet from a Kirby and Company planchette that I don't know, I love the old fonts and everything on these. So these almost all come from the 1868 craze. And so the planchette is invented in Paris in 1853 as a consequence of a table tipping seance where the spirits through the table, and that is a table that, like the Fox sisters being used as mediums, you could actually put your hands on a table or a kitchen chair and it will rap out responses the same way we're used to the Ouija board indicator moving or the automatic writing planchette moving. And so they are invented in 1853. There's a small cottage industry in Paris that kind of kind of nurtures that craze a little bit. It dies down. They're popular in England very briefly. And then after the Civil War in 1867, a story breaks, a very sensational story about automatic writing planchettes in a British publication called Once a Week. That publication and its accompanying illustrations that went viral is actually right here. And these are the original pages of the Once a Week article. And this is dated October 28th, 1867, planchette to the editor of Once a Week. And it's a sensational story. There's like this American tourist who is with some British friends in Scotland, and like one of them brings a planchette and he talks about the communications and experiences he observes, and it's super sensational and you know, kind of in a way that presents this kind of new way of communication that, you know, you could just pick up from your local dealer. There's the original illustration of a planchette in use. And so this becomes the model for planchettes. And you'll see, like, this was in the UK, British boards are usually, as you can see, it's a, you know, a nearly exact match there. Flat back, round nose, blunt, and you know, same casters and everything. So that will sort of set the standard for a British planchette. And American planchettes are going to adopt more of a heart shape or a shield shape. And so, and that's kind of general. You do have exceptions.
And so, but we have a question. Does Brandon know, or is this, you know, a truth? Are some planchettes that were built advertised as more powerful than others?
Absolutely. So you have, you know, in the patent record and kind of in the planchette record itself. So a lot of these planchettes are making claims to sort of distinguish themselves on the market, right? Because so you've got the Civil War hits massively, 750,000 Americans die, a lot of family members, dead and missing. And so this article hits, it spreads, it goes viral in the US, and suddenly there's a massive craze. So all of these, and at the time, the toy industry was not developed. That was a cottage industry. What was developed was the bookseller and stationer industry. So booksellers are the ones that are really pushing things like board games and everything in that era. And so you have all these booksellers that begin manufacturing these, and they're all trying to set themselves apart. They're all trying to, distinguish themselves. And so a lot of these planchettes carry patent applied for, patent pending, special pantograph wheels, and, whatever the case may be. But my favorite ones, the way they set themselves apart, this is a great example that y'all seen in passing. This is the Enchanting Medium. This planchette has an American shape, but it actually came out of the UK. And it says Enchanting Medium engraved right here. Maybe some costume jewelry embezzlements. And what's neat about this, what sets this apart, is something you see on some other planchettes, in that, and here's its wheels, here's the pencil aperture, but what you are looking at here is a nickel strip and a copper strip, and these are crisscrossed to your finger rests, with the idea being, so for those of you in the audience who know anything about battery history, to make a primitive battery, you alternate layers of nickel and copper, and typically salted felt. And stacks of these would form what's called a voltaic pile, and you can actually light a light bulb by stacking enough nickel washers and copper pennies along with a conductor to get your charge built. And so these planchettes, many of them rely on these sort of primitive battery theory. And you have others, there's like a lot of insulation going on. Where is my Bangs Williams planchette?
We did have a question about this picture of the gentleman that's split into three. Is that someone that you know, or a person of note? Or
This is actually an art piece of mine called Ectoplasmatus. So it was a falling apart old photograph that I split into its natural. It had already fallen apart, but it's backed by actual, and we'll come back to this. It's backed by actual 1940s era spook show ectoplasm that was recovered from the trunk of a performing spook show magician, and it was part of the cheesecloth luminous shroud that he would have draped himself in for the blackout portion of the 1940s era spook show. So he would, put this glow-in-the-dark shroud and then go out into the audience. And so the sort of tattered remnants of the shroud were found in the bottom of a trunk, along with some spirit trumpets and tambourines and other accoutrements of the spook show. And so I incorporated that as the backing on this painting, and then a vial of it as well, of some contained ectoplasm, very, very Ghostbustery. So,
we've also had some questions.
Brandon Hodge.
We've also had some questions about your taxidermied items, specifically this little guy over here, but they have been noticed in the background.
I do have some key taxidermy pieces. One of the creepier ones being what I call my Kung Fu squirrel. He was featured on the TV show Oddities, and he was found on the roof of my candy store, Big Top Candy Shop, just mummified there in the sun. He's hard as a rock, and he blew off after a storm when it was just sitting there where I parked my car, and I thought, what this thing really needs is a brass rod shoved up his ass and to be put on display in my home.
So recycled and not the Fiji mermaid.
Yeah, ethically sourced.
There we go.
But if you want to see a Fiji mermaid, we'll keep that in mind. So that's the planchette craze, and that predates, talking boards by a fair number of years. And those kind of take up the living room. We were talking about ectoplasm.
Mm-hmm.
One feature here, because the planchettes come along in 1853, and 1853 is a huge year for spirit communication. It's also the year in Athens County, Ohio, that the spirit trumpet is invented. And this is a later version. This is a 1920s era spirit trumpet, but you can see the ectoplasm extruding from it. And this is from the same batch of ectoplasm that that my portrait over there is. Ectoplasm was conceived as sort of the veil between worlds, so that you have an immaterial spirit in the afterlife and the world of the living, and between them was this silvery shroud that spirits would literally walk through from their world to ours, draping themselves in this substance to materialize on the material plane. And to give you an idea of this, I'm just going to yank this one right off the walls. This is medium Elizabeth Thompson. And at a 1920 seance in Chicago at the Masonic Hall. And so there's only one other known photograph of this event, and it was just before she got arrested. So she actually gets arrested for fraudulent activity about 20 minutes after this photograph was taken. There's one other angle of this exact moment taken by either this photographer or another. And the older woman in the chair is often identified as Elizabeth Thomas, which is inaccurate. Elizabeth Thomas technically isn't in the photo. This is her husband. This is her daughter. She would be tied up within the cabinet by an audience member. This is an audience member that has come up with questions from the dead. And this is the spirit that has extruded itself from the moisture of Elizabeth Thompson's body and materialized itself through the ectoplasm that she would produce, and has walked forth from the darkened cabinet, which was necessary for this manifestation, and is now answering questions. Of course, skeptics would say, that's Elizabeth Thompson right there. So there you go. I love the caption, "Ghost woman and husband arrested in Chicago."
How do you arrest a ghost woman?
Oh, I've got a clever answer for that, but I just can't call it mine. Camera shy, right?
Totally. Obviously.
So yeah, the spirit trumpet, and I do have some other artifacts related to the invention of the spirit trumpet. Spirit trumpets were used to manifest essentially the whispered, the ghostly whispers at seance tables. They were used in different means. Some recognized that the medium would go into a trance, and the spirit only had the ectoplasmic fortitude to, basically, create a whisper. And the medium would whisper and knowingly transmit these whispered messages using the spirit trumpet across the table. In other instances, the medium is bound, and the trumpet, which often, as we can see over here, they might be a little too backlit, but here are 4 trumpets here. These have luminous bands on the end. And so these would glow in the dark, and you would see them mysteriously rise in the middle of the seance, and begin to float. You're in a dark room, and they would begin to float around, and they would float over to your ear and whisper some message from your day. And so that's the spirit trumpet. These are invented in Athens County, same year as the planchette, 1853, by the Coons family. We've traced them all the way back to the Coons family, the family of Jonathan Coons, Athens County, Ohio, literally dirt farmers. I mean, very poor farmers, large farmstead, apple orchard and the like. And Jonathan Coons, after the death of his 12-year-old daughter, sets out to kind of debunk mediums and spiritualism. And he goes to a medium with the intent of sort of defrocking her. And I mean her beliefs, not literally. And instead, she provides a message to him that he is, in fact, the world's most powerful psychic medium, and that he should nurture these talents. He takes up automatic writing, which in the absence of a planchette is literally going into a trance and producing writing from the spirits. And the spirits give him an idea, a few ideas. One is a spiritual battery, and what they call the spiritual machine. And I'm going to show you what that looked like, and we'll we'll kind of continue talking about spiritual. So we're going to relocate to the kitchen. I'm going to home in on this page of the Scientific American. I'll try to block this glare here. This is Kuhn's spiritual machine. So in 1853, the spirits give automatically written instructions for this to be built. And what you are looking at is the cross section of a 6-foot-long cherry wood and mahogany table with these, at each corner, there was an arcing framework and that went up to a central post. And then all of these glass baubles and knobs and wires and insulators, as well as 3 banks of dove-shaped plates, which are what those little scrolly things were, of nickel and copper, alternating in a globe, essentially a primitive battery. So the idea was that this machine would charge a specially built seance chamber and allow the spirits to manifest. This family literally invents the conception of what will become known as ectoplasm. And they use spirit trumps to communicate with this band of spirits. And so it's through this machine that they built. That changes everything. You went from rapping mediums producing noises and communicating with them. And by the way, the Fox sisters are going to come out in their later years and say they were cracking their knee joints and toe knuckles all along. But the Kuhn's family will change the nature of the seance and really invent the conception of the modern seance, where we're more familiar with the trumpet floating around and the tambourines glowing in the dark and shaking, and the spirits actually manifesting through a medium in a trance and walking out from the dark room. It's all invented in 72 miles away from the nearest railway station in Athens County, Ohio, and I have some artifacts from that. So when I lectured at Ohio University, I spent a week there in an Airbnb, a former Airbnb of the home that was built on top of the old Kuhn's farm. And I spent 4 years actually doing satellite mapping of the old Kuhn's farmstead, as well as his 2 imitators. He had neighbors that built a spirit room, and 2 neighbors that built a spirit room. And while the original Kuhn's farmstead had been like split up and subdivided, there were houses and trailers all over it, the original Tippy farm still stood. And the original, when they built a new house to house all of these people, and that house still stands, built in 1858. And someone had recently purchased that home and were renovating it. And they were doing it in a way that was preserving all this beautiful old hand-hewn beams and everything. But the floor in the main room downstairs was not going to survive. It had too much water damage, and they were having to replace that. But it opened up the foundations of the home. And so I got permission from the landowner to crawl underneath, and he told me I could keep any artifacts. And I knew anything under that home, particularly deep under it, had to be an original Tippy family artifact, because there was no other way for it to get under there. And I actually recovered this frozen Charlotte from underneath the foundations of the Tippy home. So this little doll came from one of the sort of founding families of the spiritualist movement that I really fought hard to get proper recognition for.
That is amazing. It's about 3 inches in length, maybe 4.
Yeah.
About right. Yeah. Excellent. Where are we headed next?
A lot of women can come to my house and get away with saying that.
But I
That's
can't.
for the audience. All right, so keep it clean.
Hey, Silva, we did have some questions.
Okay.
Before we get the next part, people want to know, Brandon, do you have enough materials for maybe 2 whole homes, right? Like you could probably have this home and another home. So maybe that's more of a statement than a question. But just, does some of this stuff end up in museums and other parts? And like, does your collection travel? And then the second question was, someone had asked, I'm really into this. Who would you recommend to host a seance for you in Austin? This is David. In my opinion, it's Silva. I think Silva should host your seance, but Brandon, you may have someone better. You may have someone better in your mind.
No, I mean, present company by all means. If she gets out of here without carrying any, special spirits, but she's welcome to them.
I probably brought them with me.
And at any chance I get, I also promote the guys at the Austin Seance. Those guys really put on a fantastic show. They perform at the Vortex Theater as well as other venues. So definitely check out Jake and Company there. So. And yes, I might give y'all a sneak peek into my processing corner. I already warned Silva to not point the camera in that direction, but maybe I'll show you kind of what the last few months of acquisition have looked like. Sort of my COVID pile that has, I'm kind of out of wall space to put that stuff up. So it's all right, it's got to go into storage, or I've got to replace other things on the wall. And on the museum question, I am actually taking part in a 3-city exhibit that is hosted by Robert Cozzolino, the curator at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, which is doing a massive spiritualism and art traveling exhibit that will open next year. And I have I've agreed to donate a number of artifacts for that exhibit. And so I'm excited about that. And so we're in the kitchen now, a little bit better lit here. But this is my wall of mesmerism and hypnotism. So you can see just a lot of sort of mesmerism in action, often portrayed with lightning bolts of influence coming through. Because a lot of these theories, I find ancillary adjacent excuses to collect other things. A lot of hypnotism, mesmerist, and animal magnetism theory plays into how planchettes were believed to have worked. You have palmistry. It kind of goes up over the...
Oops, I went the wrong way.
Oh, it's all right.
Did I go the wrong way?
You have palmistry that kind of frames my doors here. Kind of get that because a lot of this planchette here, a lot of planchettes play on this sort of hand theme. And then this hallway is kind of my hallway of crystalmancy, which also incorporates a lot of crystal ball themed talking boards as well as some actual scrying devices and such. So. And for the last portion here, we'll move into the back room and check out kind of a heavier concentration of talking boards.
And while he does that, Brandon, can you re-mention the museum? People are kind of wanting to look up the museum that you just mentioned, that you're contributing.
Yeah, the MIA, the Minneapolis Institute of Art. So keep an eye out for that exhibit. I'll be crowing about it on my social media, of course, which is mostly Instagram, at Mysterious Planchette, all one word. So,
Perfect.
Feel free to stay in tune there. Yeah, the last wall here is kind of my wall of table tipping. About the same time planchettes are being invented, there's sort of a worldwide craze of tipping tables, which again, as I mentioned earlier, you can actually put your hands on the table and it'll move mysteriously. And you'll see that show up in a lot of period seance illustrations. Here's a neat one. This bottom illustration here is from an Italian newspaper, and there's a few noteworthy things about it. In that, one, you see a spirit getting shot by a disbelieving spectator, and that's probably bad news because this is going to be a dressed up medium. But even so, here's a battery. So they are using those early conceptions that Jonathan Coons did in the Athens County Coons Spirit Room of charging the room in preparation for the manifestation of spirits. So a really, really neat conception. The acoustics totally change once we enter my Ouija room back here. And yeah, hold on to your britches. It's about to, the ceiling changes in here and everything. Yeah, watch. She's having to navigate my furniture, but she's doing it with a long style and grace.
Excellent. Let's see, let's come back over here. The acoustics really resonate.
So yeah, actually, let me switch places here because nice job watching the sharp corners on this. This table is totally going to get my kids stars. My knees have already taken the brunt of this sharp marble. So this is the Ouija room, and this is kind of the more museum-like room. Currently hosting one more couch than it should. When this year's Weird Home store didn't have it, I was getting new furniture, and I traded my main couch, and I just couldn't give up my old main couch, and so now it's in here. And I don't know why I'm telling you this because it's not on camera, but
We had a couple other questions.
Right.
Somebody wanted to ask about the hats, kind of the Shriner type hats in the kitchen, actually, and about Jerome, Arizona.
Jerome, Arizona.
Have you ever been there?
I have never been to Jerome, Arizona. I want to say there's a famous octagonal spiritualist house in Jerome, Arizona. And there's also a spiritualist church near there that I know has a sizable collection of spirit trumpets I try to acquire. So. But I'd be curious what they're specifically asking about in Jerome.
Haunted insane asylum.
Oh, yeah, a lot of insane asylums across the country. I've got a lot of friends that explore, spend a lot of time in those. So yeah, this is kind of the Ouija room. So the Ouija comes along. First, you have a massive table. Well, first of all, spiritualism is a massive craze. It formed a religion that has millions of adherents through the late 1800s. Then you have table tipping in 1852, 1853. I refer to 1853 as the summer of tipping tables because there's a worldwide phenomenon where everybody experimenting with spirits through the tables. 15 years later, 1868, you have the explosion of planchettes. And then planchettes are going to kind of ebb and flow. There's going to be some false starts of devices that are trying to capitalize this. And then in 1886, again in Ohio, a lot of stuff is going on in Ohio. In Ohio, not far from where the Coon Spirit Room had its heyday in the 1850s, spiritualists began pairing the mysterious movements of the writing planchette, but also getting tired of having to interpret these writings. They pair the mysterious movements of the planchette with an alphabet board, and another story goes viral, and it's known as the talking board or the new planchette. And essentially, we've settled on the term the talking board, as the press did there at the time. And influenced by this are a couple of men in Chestertown, Maryland. Charles Kennard, a fertilizer salesman, I can't make this up, teams up with a coffin maker, E.C. Reish, and the two of them produce, we predict, probably a couple of dozen talking boards. They weren't named or branded yet. They are sort of a local phenomenon at some Halloween parties there at Judge Wilkes' house. And Charles Kennard decides this is a commercial idea that he should run with. He moves to Baltimore. He's a Freemason, which is what the hats are, by the way. These are Shriner and Freemason hats. No spiritual significance, but they sure are cool. I collect some secret society and fraternal stuff. Teams up with some Freemason brethren, and they then form a company to produce talking boards on a mass scale, seeing that they could, maybe have a product here. And this is at a time when the toy industry is really growing. Lithograph prints are becoming more popular. And so they kind of finalize the talking board. They are able to get a patent on it, which in hindsight, they never should have been able to secure a patent on something that had already been in use by spiritualists for decades. But they, and particularly just 4 years previously, the exact same thing that they invented had been in use and had been in all the papers. But you didn't have Google back then. They impressed the patent office enough that they were awarded the patent on this device. They take this then unnamed board, which, darn it, let me go grab mine. Stay right there. So I'll be right back.
I'm going to keep looking at things.
So they take this.
Hold on, we got to give you your 5-minute warning.
That's a 5-minute warning.
5 minutes.
So they take this unnamed board to the apartment of one of the founders' boarding houses. They have the medium Helen Peters, who was an early investor in the company. They have Helen Peters using the board. They had kind of a working name for it they weren't thrilled with, and they said, why don't we ask the board what it would like to be called? And the board spelled out O-U-I-J-A. Ouija. They asked it what that stood for, and it spelled out good luck. And they liked the sound of it. They had an evocative name, and the Ouija board was born. It was patented in the early 1890s and suffers its early successes there. You can see it has this kind of unusual paddle-shaped planchette. We believe is a way to largely sort of differentiate it from the heart and shield-shaped writing planchettes that were popular at the time. And, you know, it's got 4 little legs here. You've got your patent mark, patented February 10th, 1891 on the back there. And yeah, the alphabetic talking board is born. And this is going to spawn a host of imitators. And thank goodness, like, you know, just like with the writing planchette before it, it's going to suffer these sort of waves of popularity. And of course, giving me a wide variety of boards to collect. It's really going to have the peak of its popularity in 1920 to the point where even Norman Rockwell, as you can see up there, is going to produce a cover of the Saturday Evening Post in 1920. And just I probably could write an entire book just on 1920. It's absolutely bonkers just how popular the board was in that year. I mean, just looking at like search results in the newspaper database, it's just absolutely crazy. From 1919 to 1920, how crazy this craze gets. And it's really going to ride its popularity in the aftermath of worldwide conflict. You have the Spanish flu in 1918, the Great War ends. And so, you know, with a great loss of life comes those questions and people, you know, seeking answers about them. And so it has a great amount of popularity in the 1920s. It has another in the 1930s. After the Second World War, it has an amazing surge in popularity. A lot of the boards in this room are from the Second World War.
Do you do any public lectures? Someone asked.
I do. I've done some here locally. Yeah, I'll announce any of that on my social media. And so, yeah, I do a pretty thorough chronological, you know, walkthrough of the evolution of these devices.
And all of that will be available on Mysterious Planchette on Instagram. That's where you post. All right.
That's it.
Excellent. Anything else? Anything you're dying to share? Any piece that we didn't get to look?
Dying to share.
But
And by the way, thank you for my potted plant, my potted succulent, by the way. This is the house succulents go to die, but I promise I'm going to take care of that one. I have the spirits of succulents haunting these holes.
Very nice.
I'll try my best.
What was that, David?
I was just worrying about that plant now that we you know we gave Brandon something and now it's not going to make it out alive, but
Would you expect anything else?
Brandon, everybody loves it. We've promoted your amazing small businesses here in town, your Instagram. People are really looking forward to that book. I think you're going to have a bestseller on Amazon when that thing comes out, and obviously with our crowd. So we look forward to that. And thank you so much, Silva, for hosting.
Sure thing.
Please take your spirits back home with you and don't leave them there with Brandon.
I will try.
And we'll thank you guys for now, and we'll switch it out. And Brandon, I think you're going to see a lot of good questions coming your way on Instagram. All
right. Looking forward to it. Y'all reach out. Keep in touch.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.